Yes, but in the town of Tobruk, this is what they think of his green book. Here, the commander of the Libyan army has told Al Jazeera that his forces are with the people, not Gaddafi.
I was with him in the past, but the situation has changed. He's a tyrant. I've heard him in his speech. We're not separate. We're not secessionists. We're not asking for separation.
Pictures like this serve to demonstrate the standoff that's now holding in Libya. The people of the uprising say victory will be theirs. This is the town of Misrata in western Libya, which has reportedly fallen to the opposition. If these pictures are accurate, then they would seem to bear that out, but the country remains split. These pictures ran on state TV on the night of the 23rd, showing Gaddafi supporters filling the streets of Tripoli. This woman screams her support for Gaddafi, but we cannot independently verify when the film was shot. State television also aired a short speech by Gaddafi's daughter, Aisha, refuting earlier reports that she'd left the country.
I would like to tell the Libyan people that I'm as steadfast as this house I stand in front of. And this shows to the Libyan people the amount of lies, fabrications and false news these channels are spreading.
The international media is now beginning to find its way into Libya. These pictures show pro-democracy supporters celebrating their control of the city of Benghazi. But interpreting the direction events are heading in remains as difficult for people in the country as it does for the outside world. This video purports to show the aftermath of fighting on the streets of Tripoli between pro and anti-Gaddafi forces. It's been widely reported from the capital in Benghazi that gangs of yellow-hatted militia have been given free rein to move house to house in the hunt for the opposition. Gaddafi's tactics have enraged even those who know him well.
He's using mercenaries, not because he wants to use them, because he cannot use the army. He cannot use the armed forces of Libya because they are Libyans and they are faithful and honest people. They will not kill themselves, because killing their cousins and uncles and friends, it means that they are killing themselves. So he doesn't trust them. He doesn't trust even his own guard.
Video emerges all the time demonstrating chaos and the danger which protesters often run headlong into. Here, for instance, there seem to be snipers on the roof of the building opposite. A small crack and a man goes down, shot in the groin. The latest rumour, again unverifiable unless it happens, is that Gaddafi has threatened to blow up his oil pipelines, which would bring havoc to a country already beset by poverty and would have ramifications on oil prices across the world. Charles Stratford, Al Jazeera.
The Secretary General of the UN, Ban Ki-moon, has called for an end to the violence in Libya. He had this to say from New York.
We view the recent events in Libya with particularly grave concern. The current situation is unpredictable and could go in any number of directions, many of them dangerous. At this critical juncture, it is imperative that the international community maintain unity and act together to ensure a prompt and peaceful transition.
Let's talk to Al Jazeera's Kath Turner for more on what's happening over in the UN. She's joining us live from New York. Kath, do we know what the next step is for the UN?
Well, at the moment, Doreen, we're looking towards Friday into Geneva, actually, for the United Nations Human Rights Council, which will hold an emergency session on Libya. They've already released a draft resolution, which has been already criticised by some human rights companies, one being the UN Watch. The resolutions calls for things like strongly condemns the recent extremely grave human rights violations, strongly calls upon the Libyan authorities to immediately put an end to all human rights violations. Other terms such as also urges, strongly urges, urgently calls. This is very typical kind of United Nations lingo. The United Nations Human Rights Council is a separate entity, a separate body to the United Nations Security Council, but both have a voting system which can often break down when it comes to trying to get some kind of unity and the kind of going forward that Ban Ki-moon talks about in the voting in the member states and in the reluctance of some member states to interfere in other countries. That's where you're going to see the watered watering down of some of those statements. So on Friday, the Human Rights Council will meet in this session. They will try to put out a resolution, but I doubt that there will be anything concrete in it which will lead to any meaningful action in Libya. That'll be happening on Friday in Geneva.
Okay, and what about the Security Council? We've been hearing about this talk of possible sanctions, but it's just talk, isn't it? I mean, everything's going at quite a slow pace.
Absolutely. The United Nations Security Council has 15 members. 5 of those have veto voting powers. There is talk amongst the corridors here that there are talks of more measures like sanctions, but those kind of things take days to put into action and to get agreement on. Again, on Tuesday here, we saw the Security Council locked behind closed doors. Took 3 hours to agree on the wording of a 5-paragraph statement. Very typical for the United Nations, gives you an idea of the kind of negotiating and the kind of deals and compromises that have to be made in order for the United Nations Security Council to reach a consensus. When you have things like sanctions, which need much more detail, far more discussion, how will they be enforced, who's going to enforce them, who will they target, when do they start, these kind of details have to be hashed out. And when the violence in Libya is continuing and the international community is calling for faster action, something to stop the violence that's happening right now, the United Nations Security Council gets bogged down in detail and ends up coming up with some resolution or some kind of wording which says, yes, this is what we mean, but we can't do it yet because there's just too much to get through. So in terms of the international community waiting for the Security Council, that could be literally days away, and that may not be soon enough for people in Libya.
All right, interesting there. Thank you very much, Kath Turner from New York. Well, events in Libya are being watched very closely by most of the world's major oil companies. And since Libya emerged from international isolation nearly a decade ago, it's been investing its cash around the world. And now companies, as well as countries, are under pressure to come clean about their dealings with Gaddafi. Banu Batnagar reports.
What does the Juventus Football Club, Italy's biggest bank, and the country's biggest oil company have in common? All have a Libyan connection. After the oil-rich country renounced weapons of mass destruction in 2003, it's been the darling of the West, managing to secure multi-billion-dollar deals, make investments right around the world, even secure the early release of the convicted Lockerbie bomber. Now, from Washington to London to Rome, it all seems a bit premature, and Libya's former colonial overlord Italy stands to lose the most. The Libyan Foreign Investment Fund owns 7.5% of Juventus, one of the world's most successful football teams. Libya is the largest shareholder in Italy's biggest bank, UniCredit. Then there's the Italian oil company Eni, which has been drilling in Libya since 1959, longer than Gaddafi has been in power. And 2% of Italy's biggest defense and security firm, Finmeccanica, is also owned by Libya. Italy's Silvio Berlusconi and Muammar Gaddafi signed a 2008 friendship treaty in which their two countries promised billions of dollars in mutual investments. Since then, Libyan and Italian interests have become more entrenched, and now at a time of uncertainty in Libya, concern is mounting in many boardrooms. But Italy isn't alone. Gaddafi's overtures with the outside world stretch far beyond the Mediterranean. Take a look at this list of all the known companies and the countries where they're based with significant oil deals.